Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Fresh Out the Box, a first look at Cthulhu Awakens. I am the Game Master Extraordinaire and Board Game Guru, Johananon.
I'm the co-host of Fresh Out the Box. It's me, Casualty, CDG. I'm a retired child crimes and human trafficking detective turned tabletop titan and improv comedian.
And I am Michael Powell, or also you can call me Professor Mr. Kapow, fresh from Massachusetts University, and you can find me all over the internet on my social medias, which is usually at Mr. Kapow, that's MRKAPAO, or my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Michael Powell Does Stuff, because I do a lot of stuff, like my YouTube channels, which is Fantastic Tales of Adventure, or my horror channel, Dastardly Tales of Horror.
Well, all right. Hi, I'm Chris Pramus. I'm the president of Greenery and Publishing, and I've done a lot of stuff in my 29 years in the game industry. So our new hotness is Cthulhu Awakens, which is kickstarting now. And that ends on March 23rd, so you've got a little bit of time, but don't wait too long.
Excellent. And so we have some information about this. We got to see a little bit, and we like what we see. I've seen a few actual plays of this already. One by, I believe Ian Lemke was doing it, and that was very cool to see. So this game uses the Age system, the adventure game engine, which you yourself created. So
correct.
How do you feel about this adaptation of your beloved game engine?
Well, I like it, obviously.
Yeah, I figured.
What has proven true about the adventure game engine is that it's very adaptable. It started as, straight up fantasy. I designed it for the Dragon Age role-playing game back in, 2009, something like that. And we have successfully adapted it to a bunch of different genres and properties since then. So we did the Modern Age game, Blue Rose, our game of romantic fantasy, The Expanse, of course. Then for The Expanse, we did a world book based on the Lazarus comic, which is fun. And it'll also power our upcoming 5th season role-playing game based on N.K. Jemison's trilogy of novels.
No, the Broken Earth trilogy?
Yeah,
man, that is that's actually really cool. I'm a huge fan of those books.
Yeah, they're great books.
The only trilogy ever to have every single installment win a Hugo Award. First time that's ever happened. So I look forward to that. I hope we get to do that on the channel. That's fantastic. That kind of took me. Gary, take it away. That was
John wasn't ready for that.
I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah,
that put me on my back.
Gary for years.
I'm bringing the realness.
It's funny that the story that you told. We have been, when we started our channel, we just didn't want to play more Dungeons and Dragons. It's nothing personal. We love D&D. We started with D&D, but there are just so many more games and engines out there. And we started with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay on our channel, and
nice.
I've ever since we kind of sealed that one, we keep saying we're going to go back to a fantasy game. And we keep saying, we're going to go back, we're going to get to Fantasy Age. I'm a huge fan of Dragon Age from way back. I love the Dragon Age series. Dragon Age Origins, one of my favorite role-playing games that exists. I remember playing every single beginning on every single character and just loved the lore dive into that game. And I am not usually that deep into games besides like Elder Scrolls. So big deal for me. And we can't wait. We can't wait to get to Fantasy Age. And is there, from what I understand, there might be a Fantasy Age like update compendium type of situation happening, or did I make that up?
Yeah. We've been working on a core rulebook for it. And so that is in editing right now. So
perfect.
We'll be releasing that hopefully over the summertime.
And
Looking forward to that.
And
we are so
I just want
excited
to say,
to play
I
that.
know. I just want to say, I know that I've been bugging both, Gary here and Jahan here, that I've been really wanting to play Fantasy Age myself. Like,
Yeah,
hey guys, when we playing some Fantasy Age. Hey guys, when we playing some Fantasy Age.
Yes.
Yeah, it's got a lot of new cool stuff in it. We're adding a fourth class to the game, so that's
Ooh.
news. It's called the Envoy, more of a social-oriented character.
Mm.
That's super cool. Yeah, that kind of stuff gets swept under the rug a lot of times in games. It's cool that you guys would put a focus on that. Yeah, we've played a lot of Age. I think we have over 50 episodes almost of Age content. We're pretty close. We have a lot of Green Road of The Expanse. We did a long stint of that, and we are currently doing a Modern Age system in the threefold setting. And it runs a lot of horror mostly because of where my brain goes, how my brain works. I think I have issues. But so we've been playing this game. It's been pretty creepy, and they're having a good time, I think. But Cthulhu Awakens has it's bringing a lot of that eldritch horror that I love into the Modern Age system. And it's very cool. My understanding is that they are pretty compatible, so you can kind of mishmash. Yes. I've seen a lot of you guys do a lot of articles about mishmashing all of your various settings. I've seen you guys mix Modern Age and like the Pirates of Freeport and all those things going on. So I'm excited to either add this to my Modern Age setting or do an entire Cthulhu Awakens campaign. What are some of the elements of horror that we can expect from Green Ronin's Cthulhu Awakens?
Well, so Cthulhu Awakens was originally going to be a supplement for Modern Age, and then at a certain point, I felt like it's just going to be easier to sell this as a standalone game, and it would also give us some freedom, to adapt the system more. So at a certain point, we decided just to do that, and which of course made it way longer. So now, it's currently up around 300 pages, maybe more, depending on how the Kickstarter goes. But yeah, the starting point was Modern Age, and it took some of the options that had been presented in like the Modern Age Companion and things like that, and made them core to the play. So, and basically like developed certain ideas further, but not just for Modern Age, actually from some of the other Age games as well. You may be familiar with the distortions system from Modern Age when dealing with horror. So that was further developed here to deal specifically about the mythos. And it's how we decided to tackle encounters with the mythos, because we didn't want to talk about what happens to you in terms of your sanity when you encounter the mythos. We feel like the important thing that's happening is that by experiencing the mythos, you begin to understand it, but you're beginning to understand a completely alien consciousness. And basically, that fucks you up.
Yeah.
So, the more you understand the mythos, the more sort of unmoored you become from kind of reality, or people consider reality. That's kind of the notion of it. So it's not just like any scary thing that gives you distortions. It's the mythos specifically. So, you might see something, you might witness a horrible war crime, but, and there's like deep ones gnawing on bodies or something like that. It's not going to give you a distortion per se. That was one way that we took something from Modern Age and then, modified it to make it more specific for the mythos. We also did things like we took the relationship rules from Blue Rose, and we've got what we call bonds in CTHULHU Awakens. Uh, we've had that sort of stuff before, but you basically there's just more options for bonds, and they affect play a little more. And we also added something called external bonds, where typically you decide bonds for your character. External bonds are like people or organizations who have a relationship with you, whether you like it or not. So, that could be friends, enemies, what have you. And it lets the GM play some with that whole system.
I enjoy that you give the game master the option to put bonds on people. That's cool. Definitely a cool thing. Tying people up with stuff, it helps with the story. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to say I was actually watching one of the live plays last week, and the whole thing when it was explained the distortion stuff, it actually really also reminded me of that movie Into the Mouth of Madness from John Carpenter, where you become as you get deeper into the mystery, into the a lot of curse, right, Johan?
Yeah, curse all you want.
Mildly, right? Okay, when you're getting into the shit, more into the shit,
Yeah.
you become part of the mythos. You lose yourself into the mythos.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Yeah. So, the one upside, potential upside, is that it can lead to flashes of insight as well. So it's not always just terrible things. Like you might actually, realize some interesting truth or fundamental truth or something. But it's never cut and dry with the mythos.
So I was curious what some of the distortions were, and I didn't want to put you on the spot. So I bailed through the document here while you guys were talking, and I'm just going to read a couple of the sample ones off. And of course, with every Green Ronin game, this make your own, right? But these are just some samples so you can kind of get the feel. The first one is marked. Whatever's behind the incident knows all about you. It or its agents follow you. They're planning something, and your days are numbered. You've seen glimpses and heard whispers of the plot against you. Why hasn't anyone else? You might surrender to your doom or load up with everything you need to fight. But they're out there. In a world stalked by cults, it's not necessarily unreasonable to assume they're after you. But the life-disputing intensity of your reaction is stronger than may be rational, and sometimes you accuse the most unlikely people of being them. After marked is obsessive. Something you experience won't leave your head. After that is ominous. You have a sense of doom, and the signs are all around you. Pessimistic. You failed to handle the reality in front of you, and you know that you are not ready for the challenges that lie ahead. Presence. You see things no one else seems to see. Primal. When danger comes, you submerge yourself in ancient instincts. Ritualistic. You received a vision or intuition about how to protect you and yours. There's more, but I'll stop there. So those are kind of what you're looking at with the different distortions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your character can only have so many of them, basically.
Yes, that's right. I think it might have said 4 or 5.
It's
5.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool.
And you can
Kind of
also
lost
have
to the mythos at that point.
temporary distortions as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily want to grill you on how it works all the way, like specific. But are those things that the game master can just kind of put onto you if certain things happen, or is there like an accumulation of this awakening of your mind?
Well, so you get them by failing tests. Mm-hmm. So different points of the adventure, you may be called to make a willpower test or something like that because of what you've encountered or deduced or what have you. And if you make it, you deal with the new information. And if you fail it, then it can lead to distortions.
It's very cool.
So kind of like in our threefold game when my character went temporarily blind.
That was fun.
Exactly.
I've never felt so bad for doing something to a player before. That was unnerving.
Another cool
That
thing
was
about the
really fun to
distortions
roleplay.
here is it says that the player actually picks the distortion on their character so that it's roleplay appropriate, and the game master approves it, of course, which is something that you see a lot in these Green Ronin books. Is the player chooses, and the final step is game master approval. I love that. That's
I like it.
I've had players who
I
come to the table with some bullshit,
Yeah.
so I like that step.
Well, in a world with Bodie McBoatface, you have to be giving people too much power.
Yeah. Giving players agency is always good, but it's always nice when there's checks. I do love to see what players do with the agency, and it also makes them have more of a connection to what's going on, I feel. No, I really like it. Yes, Troy's mentioning Jimmy Puddles. Because on our game, we also give the chat the power to name characters and give people like hero points and doom points and whatnot. And Troy named one of our NPCs, "Oh boy, Jimmy Puddles."
Oh, all right.
So yeah, sometimes you give people too much power, and then you get Bodie McBoatface.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jimmy Puddles is one step away from boarding Bodie McBoatface. That's where he belongs.
You must be.
So, are you yourself a fan of like Cthulhu mythos and that kind of thing? And Eldritch Horror? Yeah, I figured as much.
So I started role playing in 1979 when I was like 10 years old with D&D, of course. And the winter that Deities and Demigods came out, I got it right away. And I was not really familiar with Lovecraft at that point. And so they had a chapter in the early versions of that book about the Cthulhu mythos, so the Melnibonian mythos from Elric. And later versions didn't have those for licensing reasons. But anyway, that was my exposure to it. And that is, what led me to go seek out some Lovecraft stories in the bookstore and so on. And I've done a fair amount of Cthulhu gaming.
Excellent. Yeah, I've actually so I'm somewhat familiar. I read a little bit some of the the compendiums like Waking Up Screaming, delved into the Necronomicon a little bit, that kind of thing. Watched the show Lovecraft Country on HBO, which I thought was fantastic. I haven't actually done any real Cthulhu role playing. What can I expect from that? What's the vibe like? How should I?
Before you answer, Mr. Kapow, what's your exposure with Cthulhu verse type stuff? Also, let's just everybody throw their hat in the ring.
Yeah, throw your hat in the ring.
I've read the books of the H.P. Lovecraft stuff and created mythos around it. Also, as a person of color, I do recognize there's a lot of problematic stuff. There's a lot of problematic stuff in there.
So that's actually what I was going to say is like I first learned of Lovecraft in high school, and I learned the problematic stuff before I learned any of the setting.
No.
And so I have somehow made it this far in nerd culture without ever actually getting into Cthulhu lore, which what I like about this system is that it's not Lovecraft Cthulhu stuff, right? Is that it's kind of a reimagining, if you will.
So our idea was basically to take the Lovecraft stories that are in the public domain, plus some earlier things like Robert Chambers, and use that as kind of a base to build our own take on the mythos with. And one of the things that we just, knew was necessary from the start is that we had to make a very strong statement about Lovecraft's racism, and not trying to be like, oh, well, he had some unfortunate views. Like, no, he was a white supremacist and informed some of the things that he found to be really scary, like dark. So, we obviously didn't want any of that. So that is not the part that we kept from Lovecraft. Basically, cosmic horror. We didn't want the racism, so that's how we approach that whole thing. So yeah, people who know the Lovecraft stories, like you'll definitely see things or people that you're familiar with, but oftentimes we like carry on the story. So one of the conceits of the game is that it's set in what's called the Weird Century, which is basically a period of increasing mythos activity that started in the 20s and goes to today. The idea is that today we're on the edge of apocalypse, which, considering world events right now, not too far from the truth.
Yeah. Like I said before, that yes, Lovecraft himself as a person, extremely problematic. But myself, as someone who's a fan of like the Cthulhu mythos stuff, I basically use him as what not to do. Like stuff he does kind of go the opposite way, Yeah. And at least kind of to me, it feels like that the Cthulhu mythos today has now become more than Lovecraft. It's now a genre in itself.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things about the mythos is that Lovecraft started it, but even in his day, he had a circle of friends and fellow authors who themselves played with it. Robert E. Howard did some mythos stuff. And then, after he was dead, it continued throughout the decades. Robert Bloch and, August Derleth and all the things that he added, and just on and on. Lovecraft Country is an example of another, look at the mythos. And so, I mean, essentially, we're in the tradition of how the mythos developed. But we're not referencing a lot of things that gamers think are core to the mythos because they are from writers who came later, whose material is not in the public domain. So
that's something I think that it's such a unique position for me, having no knowledge and basically no expectation. This is all fresh to me. I'm like a little baby bird seeing Cthulhu stuff for the first time.
I like.
Well, I mean
really quick, I just want to say I like to think of it as the Cthulhu mythos is basically for the cinematic universe. It's the literary universe.
That's fair. Yeah, it is like an extended. It has this, I don't know. It's this amazing body of work that has evolved through so many different forms of media written. There's all these board games. It's very popular in the tabletop community.
For sure.
Video games, all that good stuff. I mean, some of my exposure to it was from like Smash Up, where there was the Eldritch Horror expansion, which was a lot of fun. That was my introduction to Ismith and the people that lived there. But yeah, I'm glad that Mr. Crow brought up the problematic part. That's always it's always been a struggle for me because I also love the mythos.
Can't really just tiptoe around it,
it's good to get it out the way.
I love what Chris said. All the cosmic horror with none of the racism. That's the tagline for the game, as far as I'm concerned.
Tagline. I loved. That's what I loved about Lovecraft Country was that they took this stuff from this racist old man and they turned it into a story of black empowerment, and it was just fantastic. One
of the conceits of the game is also that those old stories like hinted at the truth, but the people who wrote them down had their own biases, and in many cases, how they interpret the mythos was a reflection of their own issues, and not necessarily the truth of what was going on. So essentially, we take the idea that Lovecraft was right about some things and extremely wrong about other things because of the way he was as a person. But like alien entities don't really give a shit if you're a racist, whatever, because they have a completely different understanding of space and time and everything.
I like the way you're talking about it because it's like all of this stuff is real.
Mhm.
And H.P. Lovecraft was just some old racist piece of shit that saw it and wrote it down, and then added his own flavor. That's really, really funny
It's
and
clip
a little scary.
notes.
Yeah. Yeah, and the stuff we added was to broaden out the palette a bit from white New England. So,
Mhm.
um, one of the things we've put in the game are some kind of agencies and things like that your characters can align with. So one of them is called Misty Valley Junior College, and it's what is termed a historically black college, which is a legal category in the United States that basically is universities and colleges that were founded after the Civil War, but before the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. So there's there's one point, 130 or more of them that basically were founded to educate people of color. And so Misty Valley Junior College is one of those. And it was basically like people who wanted to say, go to Miskatonic University and delve into mysteries, but couldn't because they weren't white. They went to Misty Valley, and it has its own history of development with
I like that. I like
things.
that.
That's super cool, and that is a super awesome addition of a story of people of color that you have added. This lore that you've put in. So it sounds like you're putting in a lot of your own stuff too, and that's really cool.
Well, I mean, that's really part of the fun. I mean, if, like the idea of Cthulhu Awakens wasn't like, let's convert an existing game to our rules.
Yeah.
It was, let's take our rules and explore the mythos in the Green Ronin way, and offer something different.
So that's a question I have as more of a game designer side. As the president of the company, you have the writers, a lot of writers and designers who work under you. How much of this imagining is your baby? How much of the imaginings and the stories are from your team? Was this like a whole group effort, or is there a lot of Chris in here?
So it was a group effort, but the whole impetus for this project came from Malcolm Shepard, who is the line developer for Modern Age. As I mentioned, this started as a Modern Age supplement, so it came out of his line. But we recruited the whole group of freelancers to work on it, and they each brought different things to the table, and added different points of view and new fun things. So, I mean, I would say it was a team effort. It was more like Malcolm and his team than me, per se. I am actually writing a Cthulhu Awakens adventure now, but I wasn't
That's awesome.
deeply involved in the development of the rulebook.
That's super. I'm glad I asked that. I'm excited that you're writing an adventure. That's I would never have known.
That's
Great.
Yeah.
And we actually, Malcolm's a friend of the show. We've had him on a couple of times, and he actually was playing a game with us for a while.
Oh, right.
When he launched this Kickstarter campaign, he was like, "Sorry guys, you have to give me a second." We were like, "Hey man, we get it."
Kickstarter is a big deal.
That's great. I didn't know so much of this nightmare fuel was from Malcolm.
Makes
Poor
sense.
guy.
Makes a lot of sense. From the mind of Malcolm. That's what the mountains of Malcolm's madness.
Malcolm knows like a lot about the mythos. Like I'll read stuff in our game and I'll like have to double check to see what is different about that than like previous versions, because I don't necessarily notice like off the top of my head whereas Malcolm can do that sort of thing. It'd be like, oh yeah, this was done in a different way. It's different than what people consider to be canon in some cases.
Yeah, I've heard him speak on the subject. I heard him talk about Cthulhu. It was crazy. It was like a whole just encyclopedic knowledge just falling out of his face. and it was truly a pleasure to behold. It's always nice when people are passionate about what they're creating.
Yeah. I mean, what's
yeah.
is that we have dabbled with Lovecraftian horror before in one of our our very first setting, really, which was our Freeport City of Adventure setting that I created at the dawn of the D20 era in an adventure called Death in Freeport that debuted same day at Gen Con as the third edition D&D Player's Handbook.
Wow, that's
the
really
idea
cool.
for that was, take D&D, add pirates, and add Lovecraftian horror, and mix it together, and that's Freeport. So we've had mythos elements in that all along, but we never went, like, we don't name Cthulhu or anything like that, but, the yellow sign is in there, that's where serpent people are in there, and things like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, third edition's where I got my start into the TTRPG world when I was a wee lad. So it has a fond place in my heart. Yeah, Freeport sounds really cool. I've read a bit about it, doing research, because you guys have so many games. All these age games are... I really like it because you get to play a bunch of different games without having to learn a new system every time, but it's still different. They all have a different flavor.
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, what do you think gives Cthulhu Awakens its flavor?
Well, I mean, for one thing, just the setting itself. I mean, it's a setting that talks about history from millions of years ago when, alien, different groups of aliens were fighting to colonize Earth and this sort of stuff. And it's not just like some like fan wank, 5 million years about my campaign world because it's super important. Like, it's actually relevant, to what's happening in the game. So, it's very different than, particularly if you've played a lot of fantasy, it's got a very different tone than that. There's the rules themselves, because of the way we've adapted them, they're built to do cosmic horror stuff. Now, one thing that is different from other Cthulhu RPGs is that many of them, the player characters, are investigators, and that's in our game. Like, certainly you'll have investigations, but the idea is you can really do any sort of subgenre that you want to mixed with cosmic. So if you really want to do like a action movie style Cthulhu Awakens campaign where you're kicking cultists' ass and this kind of stuff, like, you can do that if you want to. You could do stuff in World War II. You could do 60s spies, 50s Cold War. Because that's all part of the weird century, and the book gives you everything you need to play anywhere within the century. It also lets you do fun stuff. Of course, there's a time travel element because of the Yithians, and but you can also, do like flashbacks. If you're running a modern day game, you could flash back to the 40s or something like that. I don't know, it's fun to play around with.
Yeah, I remember Han and Gary, we've had a conversation where we talked about doing a Cthulhu game set in like the height of the grunge, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all
Troy
90s. We're all 90s
yeah,
babies.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny
Cthulhu could
because
be like some kind of punk metal band or something.
Yeah. So when grunge was happening, I had been part of the punk scene for many years before that. I didn't like grunge, really. In fact, one of my old band had a song that was kind of making fun of it. And then I moved to Seattle, but then a few years later, I moved to Grunge Central, which was pretty funny.
Yeah, grunge capital of the world, and now you look back and you're like, damn, I miss grunge. Like,
I don't honestly, the like there was too much rock and roll bullshit in it for my tastes, but
There's turning on the
history.
radio now is painful. I was trying to listen to the top 10 rock songs yesterday, and I'm old.
Yep.
That's all there is
Sadly,
to it.
that's what happens.
It's how it goes. No,
I was gonna.
go ahead.
I did have another question. In The Expanse, whenever you roll sixes, there's like, what is it, John? The Doom. It's not called the Doom track, but something like that, right?
Oh, the churn.
Churn.
Yes, the churn. Is there a churn type of mechanic in this where all hell's gonna break loose on you from the alien weirdness?
So in the current draft, no. But one thing that Kickstarter has brought up a lot is people asking about this thing. We may very well add that in, maybe in the first supplement, which is called Weirdness Overflowing, and we've basically unlocked that as part of the Kickstarter. And the more stretch goals we hit, the more material gets added to that. It's called Weirdness Overflowing because it was literally the start of it was we have good stuff left over that we couldn't fit in the core rulebook because it got too big, and we want to use it. So then this first supplement, which you'll get a PDF as part of your pledge in the Kickstarter, but we may print later, is basically going to have that material and then just new stuff. So we might put a churn type thing in there.
I thought the churn was really fun, even though in The Expanse sometimes it felt kind of weird. It didn't always feel like it fit narratively in The Expanse, but anything can go wrong in space at any time, so it did fit. I think in this type of setting, in a Cthulhu adventure, that churn mechanic fits almost even better than it does in space.
Oh, it does. It does. That's the whole thing about like any kind of Cthulhu mythos type game is shit just keeps getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, the churn is very good.
There's that whole
for that cascading doom feel. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's that whole Expanse novel where they're like exploring that planet through the gates, and it's literally just like thing after thing after thing. It's, oh no, like these ancient machines have turned on and they're doing things, and now we're all going blind, and
The reason I in The Expanse, it's because it stacks, right? It gets worse and worse and worse. But like in The Expanse, maybe you're just going to have like a conversation with like the doctor that you met in like session 1, and then you roll your 30, and it's like, oh no, the space station you're on cracks and fucking explodes, and the ship hits it, and you're like, well, that's all good and fine, but like it feels maybe those should be reserved for different moments. But the Cthulhu world really is like, you're talking to the doctor, and oh god, an eldritch horror comes out and starts eating folk. Like that really is how it fits into the narrative.
Yes. There is definitely escalation that happens in those adventures.
There's a whole joke when it comes to like Cthulhu stuff that nobody ever really wins at the end of the day. Like honestly, best case scenario is you're locked up in some kind of asylum, really.
Yeah, best case
And
scenario.
that is one thing that is different about Cthulhu Awakens in that, so like, you guys know Modern Age. So Modern Age has these modes of play called gritty, pulpy, and cinematic, and that basically relate to how tough your characters are and how much you should fear getting into a fight. If you're playing on gritty mode, like, it's pretty easy to get shot and die, so you gotta be pretty careful about what you do. And then, pulpy is, as the name indicates, more like the pulp adventures, and then cinematic is like Wahoo movie stuff. So Cthulhu Awakens by default is more on the gritty side, but we actually take the fortune mechanics from The Expanse and offer that as an option. So if you want to do something cinematic, you can use those fortune rules instead to give a different flavor to your campaign.
I love that. I love playing right on that edge of gritty and pulpy anyways, and so that seems like a real fun place to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really enjoy the churn. Gritty. I've been thinking about switching to Gritty in our modern age game because of how our game goes. It has that like vibe. And this
Are
definitely
you
sounds.
kidding me? Didn't I take like 23 damage last week from one attack? If
Well,
you take this to gritty,
damage
I'm dead.
changes. Damage changes when you switch a little bit. So it would be more dangerous. Yeah, you probably be alive. I did do 23 damage to you though. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're playing gritty, you can't really act like a typical RPG character that's just like, I kicked down the door, damn the consequences,
Yeah, my character is right on
Gotta
the
be a little more
fine.
careful about those consequences.
I'm right on the line of like Peacemaker and the Punisher type of character, and I've jumped straight out of third story buildings onto the concrete and just brace for landing. So I don't want to go to gritty. No, thank you.
Hey, that's perfectly fine. That is definitely something to talk about with your players.
Break my legs in the first session and get shot while I'm on the ground.
Well, I mean,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I mean, definitely always talk to your players, right? Because
Yeah.
to gaming for different things, and some people want to jump out of buildings,
I don't want
and
to jump out of buildings. I'm fine with that.
yeah,
I
some
was
people
going
want
to
to
say,
spend a lot of time hiding so they don't get murderated. So
that personally, I'm always a big fan of your actions, as your actions that your character does should always have some sort of consequences. And when it comes to a Cthulhu type game, at least I feel even more so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Cthulhu has a whole different value. You can't. Obviously, this is set up. It is age, which means that you can do what you want with it, and it has that spectrum of play that you were talking about earlier. But like you were saying, you could do spy movie action, kicking cultist ass. But definitely, when I think Cthulhu, I think like seconds away from death and madness
Mhm.
at every second. That's what you know what I mean? That's what I think. And talk about it with your players for sure.
well, and you could do that.
Yeah. What
Definitely,
what elements of Cthulhu are you most excited about in this game of the mythos?
Well, I mean, I like where we've been able to change or add things. I mean, basically, because I've spent decades with the mythos, so like I'm not necessarily going to be like, ooh, Haster.
So
Um,
you're excited for the things that Green Ronin has added to the mix,
Yeah.
which is
I mean, because for one thing, they're either a different take or just new things, and I think that's just more interesting for everybody. Both the designers and the players, and it also means like if you're coming from other Cthulhu games, you can't trust your knowledge. Like necessarily the case that what you learned about the mythos in one way is going to be true in Cthulhu Awakens. So
I mean,
I
as you said,
that you
as you
can't
said
really trust
earlier,
what you know.
there's always different interpretations of the mythos.
Mhm.
So, what one thing that you think is right might be wholly different when it comes to the actual or in that particular game that you're playing in.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not a fan of when someone's like, "Oh, I know how that dies." It's always annoying when you have to deal with that. And also, sometimes as a game master, I'm just like, you know what? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Like you just want to, just out of spite. But yeah, no, it's cool that there is a safeguard against people who are knowledgeable, and also like not even just a safeguard of them doing it intentionally, but also it keeps it fresh for people that are familiar with the setting. Like Michael, he knows a lot about it, so he can still go into this with that amazement, excitement, and that new feel, that new car smell,
Like-
if you will.
Yeah, like for me, going into it is basically, I'm just going to be confirming whether what I know is true or not through the DM or DM.
call back to earlier when Chris was talking about all the different eras you can play and all the different timelines that are listed. All of the weapons are make on the fly, basically plug and play weapons. So you can use any weapon from any era without having to look through some giant logbook. And there are also default or sample range weapons that basically cover anything you would be looking for. It's cool to see things on here like an H&K UMP, which is like a classic Counter Strike SMG that I think anyone who ever played Counter Strike 1.5 or 1.6 has run around with the UMP. You've got Beretta on here, a Barrett, 50 cal, so it's got all the things that you could already want. And then, of course, explains how to make it fit any era. If you're playing 1920s and you want to be a Tommy gun guy, it's basically the same rifle. Whatever the setting rifle is, that's what you're using. So these rules are, as usual, easy to plug and play, and I love the examples listed.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is not a game where we're going to publish a giant book of guns, right? Because at the end of the day, like a main battle rifle from today or a bolt action rifle from, 80 years ago, like they're in a class for a reason.
A bullet does what a bullet does.
Very similar, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think is funny is, people still to this day love and buy a Colt 1911 handgun.
Yeah.
It's famous on screen, and it's famous for in Texas, where we came from, where John and I originally came from. It's a big gun culture. People love 1911s. What's that? Over 100 years old, 111-year-old gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, a pistol's a pistol at this point. A gun does what a gun does.
Yeah, I always enjoyed in the Expanse how you just have like this like small block of weaponry, and if you want it automatic, you add the automatic tag, long range tag, and you're done. Blingo blango, that's it. Guns do what guns do. None of them make you overpowered. Good stuff. I really do enjoy that.
If you get hit by a PDC, you're just dead.
I'm still scrolling through the gear, and I just got 2 high-quality drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, high quality.
Chris just...
you gotta have them. People do.
There are also street-quality drugs, just in case you guys can't shell out the resources.
Hey, designer drugs versus street stuff. It's, let's not get into that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. In the core rules, is there rules where you can actually play as creatures from the mythos, like an inhabitant of Innsmouth, or like a cultist of Hastur, or anything like that?
No, not really. We are discussing whether to add something like a Deep One hybrid. That's
Okay.
the rules at the moment.
Okay.
I mean, part of the idea of the game is like, the apocalypse is coming, and you're raging against it basically. So
Yeah.
it's more awkward when if you're a monster. But one of the neat things that we added is what are called Demi Mons, which are basically these like alternate Earth type places, and it's essentially a way you can put time travel into the game, but instead of it being like Yithians jump into your body and control you, you can travel to these other times and other places that don't exist in our world, and you displace somebody into their body.
That's cool.
So there's like 4 cities that we talk about, that are just have completely alternate histories, in the future. So there's like a New Amsterdam where it's still Dutch, but it's like, it doesn't exist here. Obviously, it's an alternate history sort of.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Demi Mons concept is very fun. Gives you a lot of opportunity to break things up, do a different sort of adventure, um, and it's discussed in the core rulebook with some detail. But then one of our stretch goals for weirdness overflowing is to do basically like a 20,000 word or so section about the Demi Mons that fleshes them out more.
Okay.
I think it's a fun concept. So
It is a really
Yeah,
fun
no,
concept.
definitely.
I
It's
saw.
kind of like that sci-fi movie, Dagon.
Haven't seen it.
yeah, me either.
No, it almost reminds me of kind of part of Lovecraft Country, where the one of the female leads like goes to the future or through a portal or something, and then she winds up living these other lives in the past,
Mhm.
and like that was a really cool part to me because that's so abstract, right? It's so high concept, like because like how you do that in a game, and it sounds like maybe Demi Mons could get you something close to that, and that could be really fun. You could play through. Maybe you could inhabit all the heroes that are trying to stop the apocalypse in each age, and you just play through the, like that's. But it's all one character. Like that's cool, man. That blows my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it lets
play
you
your
do a time
descendant.
travel thing where your characters aren't physically going there, but they're
I think I just wrote my campaign. Give me a second. I think I just wrote the whole thing. Wow. Now, I'm having like, oh man, I'm getting all tingly. This is awesome. All right, so, and that's another thing. So we just recently, Wednesday, I believe, yeah, Wednesday. We had another book that another company had given us to check out, and when we're doing that, we're always talking about when the rules, when the lore, like just breathes life into your creative like essence, like it makes you make things almost on accident. It just flows from the text, and this definitely has that. Like I just wrote a whole campaign in like seconds. It's so cool.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, definitely. And so yeah, definitely I can't wait to get my hands on the completed text and start running.
I
Although,
want to see
I might start
art,
running
man.
sooner.
That's what I can't wait for.
Yes, I am excited to see the art for the book.
Yeah.
You guys always have
Yeah,
really
I'm
cool
on.
art.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot more.
I was gonna say, I was on the Kickstarter page, and I absolutely love the special edition cover of the book.
Well, the funny thing is that our graphic designer is like, that's not final. And we said, so how's the final one going to be different? And he's like, I don't know yet.
It's gonna be better, I promise.
I don't know. I mean, I like the mock-up personally, but
It's gonna make you actually go insane. Yeah, I really.
It's like the joke that's so funny when you tell it, the person who hears it dies.
The killing joke. But yeah, the art in your books are those great. In fact, our other player on the threefold game that we're playing right now, he's the only one that's not here. One of the pictures in the book, there's like a guy walking down the street, and there's some people following him, and they have like their anima like showing up behind them, and like that whole thing just like gave him like a lot of ideas, and he wanted to deal with like psychic powers. It just inspired like a lot of his creation. So I'm definitely excited to see this artwork and see what it inspires.
yeah. So it's usually the developers who write the initial art orders, but then they go to Hal Mangold, who does all of our graphic design and art direction. Well, almost all of it. Crystal does Games Masterminds, but anyway, yeah. So Hal is great at finding the right artists for the right projects, and the level that our books are at, graphic design and art wise, is high because of him. So
I would definitely agree. I've seen so many of your books at this point, and all the artwork is just fantastic. It raises so many questions. The characters are fully developed conceptually. When you see them, you can tell that they have a backstory when you're looking at them, which I don't know. It does a lot for a game master to see that kind of artwork.
When we got our hands on Modern Age Threefold, I had to make something out of that book just because it was it was the newest supplement. So I threw on some augmented arms and stuff, and wanted to make myself really feel more like I was part of Section, and took the Section leader backgrounds. Is there anything in this book, character building wise, that you can think of that's just like it's got a real Cthulhu vibe to it, or Cthulhu flavors to it? Something that that's not just in it, like you said earlier, something that's not just an investigator or just a guy. Is there anything that's really Cthulhu stanky?
As far as character stuff goes,
Mm-hmm.
well, there are a bunch of new talents. One of the things that is different about CTHULHU Awakens is that specializations, which normally there's 3 levels of, they have 5 CTHULHU Awakens. So deeply specialize as you delve more into things. So that is different, and most of those are new.
That's hugely different. That's a big change. That's really cool. I like that. I'm looking right now. I'm like, wait, what? How did I miss that? Because I did think that those sections, I was like, wow, these sections on the specialties are long. And it makes sense because there's extra.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, that's super cool. So, what are you looking forward to? What era are you looking forward to running this when you yourself are touching the mythos?
Well, so, I'm a history guy. I went to grad school to study history, and really, I read way more history books these days than I do like fantasy or sci-fi anymore. So it's kind of my jam. So I will, most certainly be interested in the more historical periods. In fact, the adventure that I'm writing now takes place in Paris in 1934. It is an era where the French right-wing leagues, as they were called, were essentially trying to overthrow the Republic. And I'm doing a mythos tale set in there where you both get to, learn things about the mythos and punch fascists. So it's a good time, I think.
It's a good time. Fun. Seems like the right's always trying to overthrow stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an era that isn't really well known outside of France. And
I was gonna say I like history myself, and 1930s France is kind of abstract as far as history goes. You're not wrong. You have the Roaring '20s, and then you have World War II. The 30s is pretty forgotten, and France didn't take the spotlight.
Yeah, well, yes, a lot of things happened between the wars. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, enough stuff for another war.
Yeah,
we should do this again.
Enough stuff to destabilize a country enough that the Nazis just walked in and planted a flag.
Yeah, just got to give the French more credit than that. It is true that some of those right-wing leagues did become complete collaborators with the Nazis. So you can see several of them were totally in on the whole Vichy idea. So.
It's almost like history repeats itself.
I know, weird, right?
So weird.
Yeah, I love the idea of being able to put this into there's so many different turning points of history. Like now, my head is going ooh, I would now love to do a Cthulhu game where set during the Korean War, and the players have to play as soldiers going upriver, but find something, or they're pursued by something.
Yeah, mixing
more like Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Yeah, mixing Cthulhu mythos or horror of that abstract nature with actual war stories is always very interesting to me. Uh,
Mhm.
it's just I've always been daunted by like accurately running, like making you feel like there's actually an active war going on, because that's a lot. There's a lot of events that have to happen, like
Yeah.
Oh
almost
yeah.
seemingly randomly. You have to, but you
Mhm.
have to plan them to make them feel right, and but that is definitely a cool idea. And the other one that you guys want to do that '90s one, I was thinking it'd be cool to take those because I know that there's some like technology creatures in
Mhm.
this and make them weaponize Pokemon against against our generation. Because then you really got to catch them all, and
Yeah.
or else.
Well,
I think just timing and topical. This would be a great time for a '90s based Red Dawn campaign.
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Wolverines. Yeah.
Wolverine!
That could be a Russian occupation of Cold War era America with Cthulhu would be a super interesting game, for sure.
Like you said, it writes itself.
It does write itself.
Jot it down.
The players
I
have
was-
to prevent that.
I was working for this video game studio about 10, 11 years ago, and it was a studio that was part of THQ. And so we were on a Warhammer 40K MMO that never came out. But
Oh,
anyway, we were periodically, people from THQ headquarters would like come over and tell us other things that the company at large was working on and that they were excited about. And so uh, they were extremely thrilled by this shooter that they were doing. And it was basically Red Dawn, except this time it was North Korea taking over the United States.
Mm.
John Milius, one of the writers of Red Dawn, maybe the director too, I don't remember, to work on it. And I just had to restrain myself from being like, okay, but what about how this is completely ridiculous on its face? Like,
Yeah.
this is a starving nation with decrepit factories, and how are they going to conquer a large part of North America?
You forget that their leader can eat the sun and drink the sky.
Oh well,
It's one of their.
that game did come out and it didn't do well, unsurprisingly.
you don't say.
See, what I took away from this conversation is that I need to figure out how to travel to alternate dimensions so I can play a friggin' Warhammer 40K
40.
MMO. What do you I played
right?
Warhammer Online and it was super underrated. That was one of the best MMOs to come out since EverQuest. It was a lot of fun, and oh my god, you worked on a 40K MMO. You just keep blowing my mind, Ben. You just keep blowing my mind.
Well, it could have been good, but it wasn't, and then THQ went bankrupt. So.
No. Huge Warhammer fans. Definitely. Yeah. Glad to know that we're in like company. But yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know, but I designed the second edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
You keep on.
No.
I
No,
did not know. Why would I know the coolest thing ever? Why would that be privy to me? Yeah, Wolfrump. When we were playing, what would we play? 4th edition, Gary?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
That was a lot of fun to play. I really enjoy it. I even want to get back to it. Like I liked it a lot. It's probably the mythos that I know the most about because I've read like the novels and stuff. So that's really cool. I don't mean to gush over that. I'm gonna mail you something to sign for me.
I negotiated a deal with Games Workshop where we became their RPG design studio for several years. This is when they wanted to get back into RPGs, but they didn't really want to do it themselves. So they hired us, and we would work with them to set schedules and get outlines approved and all that stuff. And then we would do the design work, the layout, all that stuff. And then they obviously would do their approvals. We'd have corrections, blah blah blah. And so they published all those books that we did, but our logo is on them as well because we were the design house. So it's a fun time because first edition Warhammer Roleplay, that was like my game of choice in college. We played the whole Enemy Within campaign and that kind of stuff. So, when I was entrusted with second edition, it was like, oh.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, they actually released the Enemy Within for 4th edition recently, I believe. I saw something.
Yeah, they have, and I guess they've added some parts. I need to check those out.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm obsessed with Skaven. It's my
Mhm.
favorite. It's my favorite thing ever. From the way
I love Skaven.
Yeah, I love them. Anything like that in this game?
I can't think of anything rat-oriented off the top of my head.
Yes.
Um,
Man thing must
but,
die.
there's always room.
Supplements.
So it's true. Yeah, we could do our own homebrew, or you could put it in the overflow of madness. You never know what you're gonna get there.
That's true.
No, this is fantastic. Wow, one of the coolest people ever right here in our place. So that aside, I really the France thing's really cool. The 1930s France is a very cool choice of setting because I love World War II history. I used to be kind of obsessed with it. I learned everything I could, but it's been done a lot, almost nonstop. And so it's cool that you're doing a more or less untouched history when it comes to games.
And of course, for us in our channel and our entertainment standpoint, we always try to change up our settings in between games. So we played fantasy and we played The Expanse, which is sort of future but believable. We played deep sci-fi. Now we're playing modern age. So for us to be able to play something that is 1934 France, we're on board. We played Weird Wild West. You name it, we've been there. So we're excited to go somewhere else as well. Even though it's just one adventure, we're already looking forward to it.
Cool. Yeah.
I mean, it's time travel without the bad stuff, changing history. The worst.
Well, the way this adventure is set up, you can carry it on as a campaign if you want to. It's the adventure that's going to be in the quick start when we do that.
Very cool.
Oh, cool. That was a question I probably should ask. Is it going to be a quick start? But hey, you heard it here. You heard it here first. There will be.
Yes, we always try to do those.
They're very helpful.
We may or may not print it. It kind of depends. Sometimes we will print them for Free RPG Day. So we did the Blue Rose one last year. So we'll see about
I have that sitting around here somewhere. I definitely grabbed me a copy. It was cool to see a bunch of Green Ronin stuff on the table for sure.
Yeah, we know those guys.
Yeah, we know those guys. So another question I have. So I'm a big I always play Wizards. I'm a Wizard guy. And it definitely says it has some guidelines here. It's like, hey, people should kind of be, more or less normal, average, not know a lot about the mythos going in, but you can start with some knowledge, and it has two kinds of magic in this setting. The Eldritch incantations, I believe they're called, and the psychic stuff.
Yeah, the Eldritch workings.
Eldritch workings, yes. And those are both very cool. How Eldritch workings sounds pretty ominous. How does that play out? Are players going to be doing these, using the dark to fight the dark kind of thing?
Well, yeah, possibly. So the idea with the Eldritch workings is is it magic? Is it science? Well, it's probably both, and rather than have characters that are more or less like wizards, Eldritch workings are something that any character can learn. And of course, it's not always good for you to to learn
the cost. The cost.
Yeah, each one is pretty extensive, and they lead to stories in their own right. But it won't be the case that you were a day laborer in the factories of Birmingham, and you don't know anything about this crazy magic stuff. It's like, hey man, like it's entirely possible for you to figure out an eldritch working if you work at it for long enough.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool. That's what I like to hear. I like it when people have the ability to make terrible, terrible decisions in games. Always a fan of that for sure.
Like our threefold game where, yeah, we make horrible, horrible decisions sometimes.
All the time. It's really
This
fun.
is a gateway.
It's very fun for
Let's
me.
touch it.
Yeah, Mr. Kapow can't stop touching gateways. He's like magnetized to them. It's fantastic. Couldn't ask
You're just
for more.
helping the game master by providing additional story hooks by acting.
Exactly.
I will not disagree.
Exactly.
What he did led to a cool fight between two archons fighting in their demon forms in a stone labyrinth beneath the city of Santa Monica. So that was well done, Mr.
Letting
Kapow.
Godzilla fight,
Yeah.
Basically letting Godzilla fight King Kong. The
Just-
fight.
Keep doing stuff like that. I'm down. Yeah, it's very cool. It looks like you still have. Do you still have elite versions of creatures? Do you have like tiered?
Yeah, you can. Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of stuff from Modern Age is staying over, which is great. I love Modern Age. Having a lot of fun.
Yeah, in fact, the Enemies and Allies book it can be extremely helpful for Cthulhu Awakens because it's got all kinds of stuff in it, and converting between the two games is really negligible. So,
You heard that? You could add
useful
cybernetics to your Cthulhu.
Ooh. Be careful. Some of those creatures will
Cyber
copy
Cthulhu.
cybernetics, and then you're. But yeah, no, this.
I love it. I just flipped over to the Kickstarter. I see that the goal was 10,000. You guys hit the goal in 40 minutes. Congratulations. Right now you're looking at right about 70,000 and climbing, which is great. That's awesome news. So we see a lot of great products. Sometimes they flip onto Kickstarter and you're hopeful and they don't get to see the light of day. But having looked through this and already fallen in love with it, I'm happy that it is more than funded, looking good, on great track. Keep coming, keep pouring more into it. I think there are some more stretch goals, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I think I believe it's $100,000. That's where we do the Demi Mons stuff for Weirdness
That's
of
exactly right. There are three more steps: 80,000, 80, 90, and 100. And so it's almost all the way. You're almost over the top. You almost slam dunked on it.
Ah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely happening. So, no one needs to worry in that regard.
Yeah.
It's just, we've got more ideas. So people throw some more money our way. There's more things that can happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, these things, I mean, in the last 24 hours, usually get slam dunked on. Hopefully, we can get you closer before then, though. Definitely, if you're watching, check it out. Go to the Kickstarter, check out Cthulhu Awakens from Green Ronin Publishing, and tell your friends. I mean, this is definitely, I will stand by this product already. I've read some of it, and it's beautiful. One of our viewers has asked a question that I feel like I know the answer to, but I'll let you take it. Will I like Cthulhu Awakens if I've never read Lovecraft?
Oh, sure. I mean, you don't have to know anything about it, right? That's it's like any role-playing game setting in that regard. Like, in fact, it's almost better if you don't know anything about it because then, you're exploring the setting and the mythos as you're experiencing the game for the first time.
And to a competent user, the person who asked that question, there is lore throughout the book that is accurate based on public holding lore, right? Along with a little bit of new Green Ronin stuff sprinkled in, but it's mostly accurate to the lore, which you will learn in the book. You don't have to read anything extra. It's also broken down over different timelines and different decades to help fill you in and catch you up in a pretty easily consumable way. I've been looking through it as we've been talking today, and it's not a huge bog or anything complicated.
Yeah.
And I also want to add.
You're good.
So I also want to add touch everything and read any weird books.
Out
Wink,
loud.
Yeah.
Out loud.
Yeah.
Always read out loud in horror settings, y'all. That's rule number one.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, how do we really know you're reading? But yeah, so that's. I feel like I understand that question, but I feel like there's like a deeper thing behind it because I've gotten this from other people about Cthulhu. Kind of like that, like feeling like you don't belong because you're not like you weren't here from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then you have the gatekeepers and all that. But I feel like, I mean, obviously you would probably, I don't want to speak for you, but probably suggest everyone try this.
Yeah.
This mythos out.
I mean, one of the bees in my bonnet as a designer has been trying to recruit new people into the hobby, particularly in ways that aren't necessarily D&D. Traditionally, most companies, they just assume that D&D is going to be the recruiter, which is great. I love D&D, but a lot of people they love D&D, and then that's the depth of their exploration of role-playing games.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more out there. So that's why I did the Dragon Age RPG. I felt that was an opportunity to take people who liked computer video games and show them how they could experience tabletop games in the same world that they already knew from the video games. But at the same time, people would say, well, what if I haven't played the video games? Would it be fun for me? And it's like, sure, because it's just a fantasy setting that you can learn about. So it's like if you've played the video games, great. If you haven't, that's okay. You'll learn as you go.
Great answers. Definitely great answers. It's really cool that you try to get people in the hobby. That's something we've noticed a lot throughout your entire company because we met a lot of your people. And they're always very welcoming and always trying to get people into the hobby. They like building communities, especially our buddy Troy.
Troy wants to be your friend.
Yeah, and it's truly been a great experience working with all of you. And yeah, it's definitely cool that you want to do that. Like because a lot of people do start with D&D, and I feel like 5th edition, obviously it bridged a huge gap between the general population and TTRPG players, and it brought a lot of people to the hobby. So I'll definitely be thankful for 5th and 4th edition for doing that. But yeah, my younger brother recently started playing with us. His first TTRPG is The Wild Sea from Felix Isaacs, so that's interesting. And there's just so many indie developers out there and so many great games to try. Definitely need to try them all.
I don't think you could technically try them.
It's definitely not literally possible. But me and Gary's adage, our whole, our credo when we created this channel was we're going to play every game.
Trying. Oh, yeah, it's my bad.
We're going to play every game or die trying, yeah. And so far...
I salute you.
Yeah, we'll go to war for this. Yeah. Man, this has been absolutely wonderful having you on. Did you guys have... you got any questions for our friend here? For Mr. Chris?
You know what? I always have a question I like to ask people.
You like to ask, yeah.
I do. When you were like a 14 or 15-year-old little Chris running around, did you think that you were going to be the president of a tabletop role-playing game company? Did you have any aspiration to do that? Because that's awesome, right?
So I definitely wanted to become a game designer. The thing is, living in suburban Massachusetts, I had absolutely no idea how one could do that, right? There weren't any college programs about becoming a game designer, not at all. And so, initially, my big aspiration when I was probably 12 was I want to write an article for Dragon Magazine one day, because that was my primary conduit where I learned about the industry and other games, because at the time it wasn't strictly a house organ. They had articles about all kinds of different games. So yeah, and I was like, maybe I could earn $100. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Hell yeah, it would.
Yeah. So when I got into college, then I started thinking more seriously about, well, how can I do this? And the answer at the time turned out to be, get involved in some of the emerging internet communities, go to Gen Con and meet people. Because at the time, almost every company would go to Gen Con and have a booth, and the developers and designers and stuff were often there. And so it was just kind of a matter of hitting the bricks, getting someone to, give you a shot at something. And basically once you start producing work you can point to, then getting more freelance work becomes easier because you can be like, oh, well, I worked on these 3 different games and these 5 books, and and that's really how my career began. And I had a first company that was an abject failure, but I learned a lot. And then at the tail end of that, I was hired at Wizards of the Coast to work initially on what was supposed to be a crossover between Magic and D&D.
I remember that. Yeah. I remember that being announced through their little website at the time, the D&D Insider website. Yeah.
Yeah, so there were multiple attempts to make this happen in the 90s, and I was there like 98 to 2002. So there were a couple attempts while I was there. It didn't really happen until 5th edition, where they finally started putting out some books based on the Magic lore that you can play with D&D. But it's basically down to the way Wizards was 20 years ago, which was like a series of competing fiefdoms. So essentially, biggest group who wanted nothing to do with a D&D Magic crossover was the Magic team. They didn't want it to happen. And it's hard to do something with an IP when the IP controllers don't want to work with you, even though they've been ordered to work with you by the CEO. So I got a lot of stories about Wizards.
Ah, man, and we'd love to hear all of them. We're going to have you back on. I mean, this has been an absolute treat getting to hear all these cool things about stuff we didn't think we were going to get to hear about. This is really cool.
Well, got a lot of stories.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to bring you back and hear those stories. CTHULHU Awakens is live on Kickstarter now. It's got 12 days to go. They're sitting at 72. We're trying to get them over the 100K mark here so we can get all the content and give Green Ronin more money, because we love Green Ronin. We love the age system here on Fresh Out the Box. But yeah, the one thing I would like to say is it sounds like you've always you were always looking for, your shot. You got your shot. You got to write your first couple things. And then when you made your company Green Running, you have been reaching down and helping pull people up and giving other people their shot. Definitely, because I remember we got to talk with you guys when we were just starting out and really gave us a chance. So I just wanted to say thank you. And we appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And it's just been a great experience having you. So yeah, check out CTHULHU Awakens. I have been Johananon at RockFact on Twitter.
I'm the co-host, Casualty CDG, and you can find me at Casualty CDG on basically all the social medias. You can find Jahan and I here every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 8 p.m. until 11 p.m. Central Standard Time. We play tabletop games, board games, and we talk to people in the industry. Also, if you want to see us talk about movies and video games and other things, we have a podcast. That's called Fresh Out the Podcast, with a new episode every single Sunday. So please keep up with us at Fresh Out the Box, Fresh Out the Podcast. We love games, and you are games, so we love you. Thank you.
And as always, I am the dastardly, dashing Michael Powell, and you can find me all over the internet on my social medias, which is usually at Mr. Kapow. That's MRKAPAO. Or my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Michael Powell Does Stuff, because I do a lot of stuff, like my YouTube channel, Fantastic Tales of Adventure, and my horror channel, Dastardly Tales of Horror. And my upcoming schedule right now is the Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm on the Nat20 Productions official channel on Twitch for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's Edge of Legend. And then on Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on Twitch, I'm on Toyzilla Network for a show called Toyzilla Live, where we talk about the latest in toys and collectibles for an hour. And then I believe this next week I'm actually going to be right here on Jahanan for 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for Threefold, where we play Modern Age.
All right. Well, if you're looking for us, we are at greenrenine.com, and we're at Green Renine Pub on Twitter. We've also got a Facebook page. You can find me personally on Twitter as at Pramus, Pramas.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for watching. Check out Cthulhu Awakens on Kickstarter now. You have time. Go do it. And
That's right.
stay fresh, everybody.
Bye.